When news broke that China had unveiled what many military analysts are calling a superweapon, the international defense community immediately began paying attention. The claim that this new system could fundamentally alter US naval strategy is not just speculation from fringe voices. It is coming from respected experts, think tanks, and even quiet whispers within the corridors of Washington. The reason it has struck such a nerve is because the US Navy has, for decades, been considered the backbone of America's global military power. If a rival nation, especially one as economically and militarily capable as China, has truly developed a tool that can neutralize or undermine that backbone, then the implications are immense. The US military does not take such developments lightly, and neither should we as observers of global power shifts. The introduction of any new weapons system usually sparks debate, but this time the reaction feels different. For decades, the US has enjoyed a sense of dominance in naval warfare, relying on aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and an extensive global network of bases to ensure sea control. America's naval doctrine has been built on the idea that no other power can seriously challenge its ability to project power across the world's oceans. That assumption is now being questioned. China's new superweapon, though not publicly detailed in every technical specification, appears to be designed precisely to strike at the core of American naval superiority. Analysts suggest it may combine advanced missile systems, hypersonic technology, and innovative targeting capabilities in ways that drastically raise the risks for US forces operating near China's sphere of influence. For the US Navy, this is more than just a matter of upgrading ships or adjusting tactics. It represents a fundamental challenge to the very assumptions underpinning American strategy. Since the end of World War II, the US has relied on the ability to move carrier strike groups into contested regions, confident that no adversary could easily neutralize them. Carriers have served not only as tools of war, but as floating symbols of American dominance. Their presence off the coast of a troubled region often sends a message stronger than words or sanctions could. But what if an adversary could render those carriers vulnerable or even obsolete? That is the frightening possibility raised by China's unveiling of this new weapon. What makes the situation even more striking is the timing. US-China relations are at one of their most tense points in recent history. Trade disputes, technological competition, and growing hostility over Taiwan and the South China Sea have already put the two nations on a collision course. Now military competition has added a dangerous new layer. While Washington has long been aware that Beijing has been investing heavily in anti-ship and area denial systems, the shock comes from the suggestion that this new weapon may represent a generational leap. In other words, the US is not facing a slow incremental improvement, but potentially a breakthrough that puts its naval strategy in serious jeopardy. Let's remember that military power is not only about the weapons you have, but also about the perception of those weapons. If allies, rivals, or even neutral nations begin to believe that US carriers are no longer safe, the political value of American naval power decreases. The credibility of US defense guarantees, the willingness of allies to take risks under Washington's protection, and the deterrence factor all weaken if the perception of invulnerability vanishes. China knows this very well. In many ways, unveiling or even hinting at a new superweapon is as much about psychological warfare and strategic signaling as it is about the weapon itself. When analyzing China's motivations, it's important to consider its long-term strategy. For decades, Beijing has studied US military operations with incredible attention to detail. From the Gulf War in 1991 to the Iraq invasion in 2003, American dominance on the battlefield was clear to the world. Chinese military planners watched carefully, learning lessons from how US forces operate, what they depend on, and where their vulnerabilities might lie. One conclusion stood out: US power relies heavily on the ability to control the seas. If that control could be disrupted, if the seas surrounding China could be denied to American forces, then Beijing could protect its own interests and potentially alter the global balance of power. The South China Sea, the East China Sea, and the waters around Taiwan are not just areas of national interest for China. They are considered essential for its sovereignty, economic lifelines, and security. The US Navy's presence there has long been a source of tension. Washington argues that it is defending international waters and ensuring freedom of navigation. Beijing argues that the US presence is provocative and threatens its territorial integrity. Into this already volatile mix comes the claim of a new weapon that could neutralize US naval assets. For Beijing, this is not just about gaining military superiority, it's about reshaping the geopolitical landscape in Asia and beyond. The shock in Washington is not because the US failed to anticipate Chinese advancements. American intelligence and defense circles have known for years that China was working on advanced missile technology, hypersonic weapons, and space-based systems that could improve targeting. The shock comes from the speed and potential effectiveness of this development. If China has indeed created a weapon capable of targeting moving naval assets with precision at long ranges, and if that weapon can outmaneuver existing missile defenses, then the entire American naval doctrine in the Pacific must be reconsidered. That is a monumental shift, one that cannot be easily addressed with small adjustments. In fact, the phrase naval strategy in jeopardy is not an exaggeration. For decades, US strategy has revolved around the idea of forward deployment. Bases in Japan, Guam, and elsewhere, combined with the ability to send carrier strike groups into contested waters, gave Washington the confidence that it could deter China, reassure allies, and enforce its vision of international order. If those carriers are now sitting ducks, then the calculus changes. Washington would have to think twice before sending its forces close to Chinese shores. Allies in the region, from Japan to the Philippines to Taiwan, might start questioning whether US commitments are truly reliable. In short, the ripple effects could extend far beyond the immediate military sphere. It is also worth reflecting on the historical parallels. Throughout history, the development of new weapons has repeatedly shifted the balance of power. The introduction of gunpowder changed the nature of medieval warfare. The appearance of the aircraft carrier in World War II revolutionized naval combat, rendering battleships obsolete almost overnight. The creation of nuclear weapons redefined global strategy and deterrence. Now, with hypersonic technology and advanced anti-ship capabilities, we may be witnessing another such turning point. The country that can deploy and defend against these systems most effectively will have a decisive advantage in shaping the 21st century order. The US military is, of course, not standing still. Even as news of China's superweapon circulates, Washington is working on countermeasures. New missile defense systems, electronic warfare capabilities, and its own hypersonic weapons are all being developed. But these take time, and time may not be on America's side. China's military-industrial base is increasingly sophisticated, and its ability to innovate has grown dramatically over the past 2 decades. Gone are the days when Beijing simply reverse-engineered foreign technology. Today, China is pioneering in areas such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced materials, all of which can feed into weapons development. As the US scrambles to adapt, it faces another challenge: the political and economic costs of maintaining global dominance. Military spending is already immense, and while Washington insists it can sustain this, there are growing pressures at home. Debates over healthcare, infrastructure, and social spending constantly clash with the demands of defense budgets. Meanwhile, China does not need to match the US dollar for dollar. It simply needs to develop specific capabilities that can undermine America's strengths. A superweapon aimed at US naval dominance is precisely that kind of asymmetric strategy. From a broader perspective, what we are witnessing is not just a military competition, but a systemic rivalry. The US represents an order that has been in place since 1945, one built on open seas, American-led alliances, and a network of institutions. China represents a rising power seeking to carve out space for itself, pushing back against what it sees as American encirclement and dominance. The unveiling of a new weapon is therefore not only a technical development, but a symbol of a deeper struggle over who gets to set the rules of the international system. For the US military, acknowledging that its naval strategy may be in jeopardy is difficult. American leaders are not used to thinking of their forces as vulnerable in this way, yet ignoring the challenge would be far more dangerous. Already, war games and simulations have shown how difficult it would be for US forces to operate effectively near China in a high-intensity conflict. The new weapon only adds urgency to those findings. Some strategists are even suggesting that Washington may need to rethink its reliance on large carriers and shift toward more distributed, flexible forces that are harder to target. Such a transformation would take years and billions of dollars, and it would require a cultural shift within the Navy itself. Meanwhile, China's leadership is no doubt aware of the global attention this news has generated. Whether the weapon is fully operational, partially tested, or still in development, the very perception of it already shifts the strategic conversation. Allies of the US may hesitate, adversaries may grow bolder, and undecided nations may tilt toward Beijing. In the realm of geopolitics, perception can be as powerful as reality. The real question now is not whether China has developed a dangerous new weapon, but how the US will respond. Will Washington escalate the arms race, pouring more money into technologies that may or may not close the gap? Will it double down on alliances, trying to surround China with collective security commitments? Or will it consider adjusting its posture, acknowledging that some of its old assumptions no longer hold? These are not easy questions, but they are unavoidable. At the same time, we must remember that behind these military developments are deeper economic and political currents. China's rise is not just about weapons, but about its economic transformation, its integration into global markets, and its technological progress. The US, for its part, remains a powerful and innovative nation with vast resources. The clash between the two is therefore not just about one weapon or one strategy, but about the future of the world order itself.